of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us again. We're very grateful that we made it into another year. I have my superstar panel with me today, Attorney Primes and Banks. But first, before we get started, we need to talk about some very basic Indiana laws, some of the changes that we see that are occurring in our office. That is that Indiana seatbelt law went into effect a year plus ago. But basically it says that they could use that to reduce damages. So make sure you have your seatbelt on when you're driving all the time. But the second thing that's been around for about 5 years is no pay to play, which means that if you have a suspended license because you have an accident, if you have a second accident, you can't recover damages for pain and suffering. So keep that in mind. The third thing, folks, don't forget, use those cell phones. Anytime you have an accident, take lots of pictures, not one or two, but take about 50 to 60 of everything at the scene. Having said that, we had a crazy series of events that's been going on since we last talked. For one thing, we had some citizen activism that prevented the takeover of our congressional seat here in Indianapolis. But the main problem with that is that you got to get out to vote. I mean, we have enough voters in Indianapolis to actually comes to 1/3 of the total voter population in the state if we get everybody out to vote. So the point is that if you get all your friends and neighbors to vote in the next election, in the next couple of elections, then we win the state of Indiana. It's just that simple. Now, having said that, Council, we've had, since we last spoke, we had an evolution of things that occurred. I woke up last night at 11:30 and I saw United States is bombing Venezuela. I said, what on earth is going on? I don't get it. We killed, they say, 110 people claiming they were drug runners without any evidence that they've shown. Coupled the fight, Council, we know if a person is in possession of drugs, will they get from 1 to 20 years, and now they all get a death penalty without due process of law. So this situation, I don't know how people feel about it. It was just a strange sensation when I saw that we're bombing another country in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. And it is certainly a challenging because if you really look at our Constitution and look at the laws that have been passed, if the president is initiating a war, normally he or she should get approval from Congress, unless we're dealing with an emergency situation here. So those are concerns. So it would be interesting now that Congress is in one control of one party. You probably won't get that normal pushback, which is all the more reason for people to understand that this is an election year in 2026, and it has consequences. As a result of us having one party rule in all branches of government, there can't be any pushback. There can't be any comments about the War Powers Act, and they're not being particular compliance with that by just unilaterally initiating action against a party, a third party country. So it just further reinforces the need to make sure all your listeners, Nathaniel, have an election plan, or aware of the election, know where the place of voting is, and encouraging everybody to exercise their right to vote.
Absolutely, Attorneys Lee and Primes, and Happy New Year to everyone. We're all just digesting this news. I'm looking at headlines now that state that Maduro is expected to arrive in New York this afternoon. He and his wife are being transported here to the United States. And as Attorney Prime stated, there is no congressional authorization for this strike. I'm hearing that the Gang of Eight were not notified of this strike. And we don't know what the objective is for this strike on Venezuela. Is it to establish a democracy there? Is it to stop the flow of drugs into the United States? There's no evidence, as we've discussed on prior shows, that drugs are coming into the United States from Venezuela. And so we, the American people, have no idea of what the goal is for this strike and or what the results will be. It will certainly lead to chaos and not at least immediate stability in Venezuela. And so to execute a strike, and I understand that the president is scheduled to speak at any moment to address this issue, but to execute this strike without an immediate plan will certainly lead to further destabilization of Venezuela, um, including uh, its economy.
Yeah, it's
Supposedly they are being well, not supposedly, they're being that the president Maduro and his wife are being transported to Manhattan, where they're indicted in the Southern District of New York on charges of narco terrorism, drugs, and weapons. And it's my understanding that this indictment dates back to 2020.
well, I didn't follow the case. I don't know whether or not Marlon did. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either, but that happened some time ago. But I think your audience, Nathaniel, has to understand that the United States has a sordid history in terms of removing individuals from power. So we have to really be careful of that and learn from our past mistakes. We have a very bad reputation in Latin America and throughout many countries in the world, including Africa, where individuals that were in power were removed directly or indirectly, by U.S. intelligence. And so that's what led to passing of the War Powers Act that indicated that, hey, if there's not an emergency and you're planning to attack or engage in this sort of activity, Congress should be able to weigh in. So it's really unfortunate. The other thing I think your listeners should understand, this instability is a potential danger to a lot of Americans that are traveling overseas. And then the other thing is it could be a domino effect. I mean, what are other countries around the world going to think? What is Russia going to think? How can we basically indicate, about Ukraine and make the righteous case that they shouldn't be invaded, or talk and lecture China about Taiwan when we engage in these sorts of activities? So if there is an indictment, I think, that the administration says there is, I mean, that they need to make sure they're putting forth the evidence so that people can see it and understand it. And I think, my preference would be to work through the international community. The United States, after World War II, created an international apparatus for these type of things. And for us to go outside of that is certainly troubling in my view.
Well, Counsel, one of the big things that political pundits been talking about is that the Epstein files, that a lot of things been done to create a distraction to camouflage the Epstein. There was a congressional approval and signed by the President of the United States to produce the entire file. As of December 19th of last year was the deadline. And I saw a report, I think, that maybe there was 500,000 documents produced. Now they say there's 5.2 million additional documents. They have 400 employees working to redact information. And the ones that I saw, that they publicized on the internet, they would show a couple lines, everything blacked out, So I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure what they're producing, but what they publicized wasn't very much. And I was concerned about that. So apparently there's 6 million, somewhere where around 6 million documents. And I was thinking to myself, there, how does a single individual create 6 million documents, even for a federal investigation, Mark? That just seemed like to me that's rather excessive.
Yeah. I think that, your listeners should be concerned. We're not dealing in the 1970s. Now we have AI tools that can quickly, decipher millions of pages of documents. And it really has transformed our legal profession. So to suggest that, hey, this process should take months and months and months, is, certainly doesn't match the technology that I know the Department of Justice now has. So I think there's been a number of media outlets that has indicated that, hey, there's been a slow walking of these files because that our president may be implicated in it. And one of the things that was, shown during the break and was, widely reported was that there was an allegation by the president that he didn't ride on, Mr. Epstein's plane, and some of the document releases show that he frequently did so. And so, it appears that, these documents, they thought that they were going to only implicate Democrats, and it turns out that perhaps there are others that are being implicated as well. But my position is, regardless of whether or not you're a Democrat, Republican, man, woman, whoever you are, I mean, this is just dead wrong, full stop. When you and I are both grown men. I mean, you know what a young woman looks like, and full stop. You should be held accountable, whatever your party is, for this heinous act. Young women shouldn't be taken to an island. They shouldn't be abused, and they need to get all the files out and follow the facts wherever they lead.
Absolutely. And we're seeing again the outright, outright disregard for bipartisan legislation ordering all of these files to be released by December 19th. Period. Full stop.
Well, my concern is that what I've seen is outrageous. But my bigger concern, though, is that how does a parent allow their 14-year-old daughter to go on a trip with grown men? I don't get that part. I mean, I don't understand how these young teenagers were spotted and what were their parents doing. I was troubled by that, quite frankly. I'm not trying to cast blame on anyone, but it just seemed an oddity to me. And I was thinking about that. I would not have allowed any child of mine to go anywhere with some stranger like that. It's just bizarre to me.
It's bizarre, and I think part of the problem in our society is that we equate someone's wealth with whether or not they're good people, and nothing can be further from the truth. I mean, just because God has blessed you with money doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person. And I think sometimes people put their guard down and thinking, okay, well, hey, it's a luxury trip, and there's going to be protections, and I should just let people know that that's just not accurate. And I think you're absolutely right, Nathaniel. There should be some parental responsibility. I think a lot of these children were led to believe they were going to be working, but regardless of what was presented, certainly there's some parental responsibility. But at the same time, I think we need to keep our eye on the ball that irrespective of, whatever circumstances a child is on the premises, they need to be protected. And that's just full stop. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, grown man should know just by the way, a young lady acts, there should be a lot of visual cues that the person's underage. So there's just no excuse, in my view, for engaging in that behavior. And I think, people need to be held accountable. I know there's a number of people that may support some Democrats that are implicated, but I think we need to speak with one voice. You and I, many of your listeners have raised children, and nothing can be worse than, destroying the innocence of a child. And, as a society, we have to really focus our efforts and say, hey, if that's happened, it's wrong, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
The other thing, there's one of the things, there have been so many news items over the last couple of weeks, and there's a laundry list of things that briefly we can cover. One of the big bombshells that hit American political scenes last year was Zoran Mandami being elected mayor of New York City, the financial capital of the world, a lot of people speak of. And now you have a Democratic socialist who got elected mayor. And I saw the first thing he did was to void out the prior mayor executive orders. And it was really interesting what they were moving forward with. But it caught my eye. And I don't know whether you had thought about this, but one of the things that he was proposing was the bus service would be free, the transit, mass transit, not the train, but the buses. And I was thinking about that. I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but where do you get the money to pay for the buses and the drivers now? I wonder whether people in New York will chime in, because I was just curious as to how you pay for all this stuff. It makes sense to me, but it ain't
Well,
free.
it's not free, but the way I look at the world, and Attorney Banks can, or anybody else can weigh in, is that there are just Americans across the country just screaming about being able to raise families and being able to live, pay rent, pay mortgages, send kids to college. And so I think the battle scream across the country is that, especially in your large cities like New York, is that it's just doggone impossible. I mean, if you look at a basic apartment in New York, you're probably talking, $2,000, $2,500, if not more, and that's just the rent. And then you're talking about food prices. It's impossible to drive. You have to have public transportation. There's a lot of different barriers. So who he is speaking to is a lot of the people that are disaffected. And I think, in fairness to the mayor, if we're providing all these, benefits and tax breaks to individuals and corporations, I think, a lot of working class people are saying, hey, it's find time to find resources to help working people as well. And I
Absolutely.
agree. Go ahead. I'm
When
sorry.
you, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Attorney Banks. Yeah, go ahead.
When we look at the type of wealth in New York and the inequality with respect to that wealth, um, I'm all in favor of, and again, as we know, and I'm sure that our callers in New York can speak to this, but his whole agenda is focused on affordability and social welfare and raising the minimum wage so that families can earn a livable wage and providing for free citywide bus service and expanding child care while raising those funds potentially, Nathaniel, from other areas, redirecting them from other areas where there is bureaucratic waste. The goal and objective is to ensure that families can buy food, pay for health care, and earn a livable wage. And so I think that his plan is an excellent one.
Well, I hope and pray that it's successful for this reason. Every major city in America is facing a homeless crisis. I see here in Indianapolis, across from our office, we have a homeless shelter, and I see the human suffering every day up close in person. And I see people. I talked to a young man who had a job as a security guard. He lived with his girlfriend, and I think they have one child, and they get into an argument. So he calls the police, and the police come because he has a gun. He get arrested for intimidation. The net result is that he loses his job and he's locked up, and they drop all charges after a week, but now he's lost his job, and he he can't go back to the home because they've broken up. So he's now relegated to a homeless shelter. He then has all his earthly belongings in 5 boxes. And he showed up at our law firm door, and I started talking to this guy. I said, dude, what are you doing? This is a law firm. And I said, the homeless shelter is across the street. Then I said, what put you in this predicament? Then he gave me a story. And then I realized that I've heard similar stories before. So if the mayor of New York can solve the homeless crisis in their city, which got to be a major problem, I'd like to see whether or not that can be done in our city, because we have the same situation. We have a lot of people, counselor, that sleep underneath the bridge. When I go home at night, the overpass bridge, there's an encampment of homeless folks. You know, they're staying there. And on cold nights, I just really dread. I'm saying, how do they make it out in the cold? You know, and so I hope that people, particularly we just came out of the Christmas season, get a better understanding of this problem, because I think that we need to solve this problem, because the wealth of our nation, we could send billions of dollars to this other country. It seemed like to me that we should be able to carve out an exception and try to work as a country to eliminate this terrible tragedy, American tragedy. We have just too many people that are relegated to the street, and their circumstances all different. Sometimes there's some mental impediments, and sometimes just sheer bad luck or changing circumstances, like the young man who had a decent job, paid his bills, and lost everything with one bad decision. And so, and that's my take on this. And that's why, Attorney Banks, I was hoping that this plan of his work, because we could all learn from it. I like to see what innovation that they could use in that city. I know Renee sent me a text saying about the bus that New York City got lots of money, but I'm thinking those buses are very expensive. Every one of those buses got to be, you know, the new a couple $100,000, I would suspect.
You know, I've read Attorney Lee, and Renee is an expert on this, that Madami's plan, revenue plan, will raise the corporate tax rate to match New Jersey's 11.5%, bringing in $5 billion, and he'll tax the wealthiest 1% of New Yorkers. Those earning above $1 million annually, they'll get a flat 2% tax increase. And he will implement common sense procurement reform and senseless no bid contracts, hire more state auditors, and crack down on fine collection from corrupt landlords to raise an additional 1 billion. Some of the his plan with respect to increasing the taxes paid by the wealthy have, as you know, attorneys, been rebuked across the nation. Um, Mayor Johnson here in Illinois was proposed in his budget a corporate tax increase. And to date, it has been rejected by the state legislature. So these efforts are not wholly new, and they are bold, and they should continue to be advocated. And Attorney Lee, I hope that New York has some success with this bold, courageous agenda.
Yeah, and I think that what's troubling as well is that if you look at the fairly recent Supreme Court decision, they've indicated that local governments can get rid of homeless encampments. So you're right. You've previously seen a lot of these homeless encampments across the country. San Francisco was particularly egregious in many cities around the country. And so the question presented is, where do these people go? And the thing people need to understand, your listeners, Nathaniel, is that a lot of the people that are homeless are working. They just cannot afford to pay, the 1 month's rent plus the deposit. Which could, just by itself be, $6,000 or $7,000. And so, there needs to be some solutions. I think in cities like Seattle, they've looked at examples of maybe those small homes that maybe 6 by 6 or something of that nature, just to get people out of the cold. I mean, I think we're going to have to think out the box to make sure that happens. And the other thing I would say finally is that this isn't unprecedented. If you look in the 1920s, when President Hoover was president, there were a lot of people in Central Park that were homeless. In fact, they started calling it Hooverville. So when FDR came to power, he basically indicated that he was going to have a series of programs to help working people. The Work Progress Administration, you then had the National Labor Relations Act, where employees could unionize to increase wages. So I think we're going to have to really, think outside the box and perhaps, look at, some of the things that FDR did in terms of the New Deal legislation to kind of deal with these complex problems.
Yeah, we have a caller. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is Renee from New York. I was calling to, a couple of comments.
Well, you had to update us first on the mayor. What's going on with Zohan Mandami?
Oh, he is, this man is a genius. He is already up and running. He didn't wait to day one to start enacting some of the policies. Like you said, he got executive orders that were there that were blocking groups of people from accessing some of the services that other New Yorkers are provided. At any rate, as far as the buses are concerned, most people, well, not most, a lot of people don't even pay on the bus anymore. I've used my Metro card, I've seen other people, and then people just get on and walk on anyway, and the bus drivers are still making their salary. Long are the days gone where bus drivers stop people, stop the calls and all that stuff, because it's not worth it to them. I mean, people are trying to get somewhere, so why are people who are just trying to get somewhere? So the bus system has been fairly supported without consumers being the supporters of the bus system. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal. New York City has funds in all kinds of places that they can pull from. He might tax the 1% of New York City dwellers, and then again, he may decide not to. Depends on where he's going to find this money from. I don't know what the budget is in New York City and where all the funds are, but there's a lot of money in New York City, and there are plenty of funds that he can pull from. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for him. He'll get that part done. The bigger problem is the timing of the buses. Like, he's planning on putting in these lanes that will only be bus lanes, and somehow they started some of it already in New York City, but not enough where the buses can be on time. Or so that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge getting those lanes.
Renee, I just looked it up. Renee, I just looked up your bus service costs the city of New York $21 billion, and they were collecting $7 billion from fares, tolls, and subsidies. So I see what he's saying. So it was $7 billion, but that's $7 billion is a lot of revenue. But it costs $21 billion to operate the system.
You're correct. But New York has $7 billion. So why do you think everybody wants to be mayor and governor of New York? Because there's so much money here. I mean, there's money in all kinds of places. $7 billion is not that much to raise from the top people that are living here, and they're not going anywhere. I don't know what people are talking about. All the billionaires and millionaires are going to flee New York City. No, they're not. It's the capital. It's pretty much the financial capital of the world. So they're not going anywhere because their money is all here. I don't think people are understanding that this is not it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And why people think it's impossible is because we've been told by all the rich people and the people with power and money that it is impossible. That's not true. It's only possible. They don't want to do it. They want us to still stay in the same situation. Down here say, yes, it is possible because he's worked with city council before. He's seen where some of the money is coming from. He's got connections on the inside, so he knows money is there. It's just that they never wanted to do it.
Well,
LaGuardia is one of his.
What about the homeless people?
Yeah.
What is his plan to get people off the street?
I'm not sure what his plans are for that, but I'm going to tell you, I don't see too many homeless people in New York City. I see more homeless people in Texas than in Austin than I do in New York City. When I moved back, I was shocked that I was expecting to see homeless people in every corner. They're not there. I'm not sure. They're probably in shelters because they do have homeless shelters here. But the homeless shelters are like apartments. They're not just, big rooms with people with beds. They're apartments that the city owns and that they put people up until they can find permanent housing. So it's probably why I don't see people just sitting on the street all night or in boxes or whatever. I don't see them. So the homeless shelter system is not the greatest, but it obviously is working somewhat until people find permanent housing. So that's not as big of a deal as Trump makes it out to be. There are more homeless people on the streets in D.C. than there are here. So that's my perspective of New York City. And so that was one thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the Maduro situation. I think I know Trump is trying to start something so that so that he kind of holds us hostage to not voting some of the Republicans out because people don't like change when there's other things going on. But he's doing the complete opposite, in my opinion. He's actually driving people to want to get the Republicans out as quickly as they can because they're not stopping him from doing all this crazy. They don't want their boys and sons and men going to war for no good reason. So I think that that situation is going to backfire on him, and we'll see how it goes from there. But Maduro is supposed to arrive in New York. I haven't read the full story. I'm not sure why he's coming to New York, but supposedly he's landing here this afternoon. I have no clue what. Well,
they said they're going to try with a series of felony to keep him in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, well, like Pierre said, look how that worked out for Noriega. I mean, this is, like he said, this is another wag the dog. He's not, I don't think, his DOJ, you've seen the cases that they tried to get Letitia James in jail. They tried to get Comey. They tried to do this. They are the most incompetent DOJ I've seen functioning ever. And so do you really think they got the chops that anybody with sense is going to want to take this case on? I don't think so. That's my opinion. But you guys are the lawyers, so I'm going to leave it at that. But I'm going to let you go ahead and take your other calls. And but the question was, do you think that DOJ is possible, can try this man and be successful? They haven't done a bang-up job so far. And I'm going to get off the line and let you check all the callers. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Well, if you want, I can address that, Nathaniel. DOJ, in terms of its credibility, I think, it never was a perfect place, but it did have general credibility, especially in the federal judiciary. And a lot of that has been eroded in just this short, year of this new administration coming into office. And there have been, not only have there been, instances where a jury has voted not to convict individuals that DOJ has prosecuted, including the case in D.C. where the protester, hit someone with a sandwich. He was acquitted, and then you have the whole issue of not only that, they were not even able to get indictments, and an indictment are ex parte proceedings. So a lot of that goes to the question of credibility, and you have a number of federal judges that are speaking out more than ever before, just talking about misinformation being provided to them. When I worked at DOJ, if a judge made any inkling that you were dishonest or acted inappropriately, you had to immediately notify your supervisor, and that went to Washington because that's how important DOJ viewed its reputation, and that would be thoroughly investigated. So a lot of that's out the window. The other thing that's going to be really interesting, the second major point, is that the administration has put themselves in a little bit of a quandary because, as you remember from our prior show, the president pardoned the president of Honduras, and by all accounts, this guy was bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars of cocaine into the United States, and there was real evidence that this was a narco state. So if drugs are your main issue, how do you jive that with the Honduran president who was indicted and convicted? And, by all accounts, in terms of the press, it was very egregious. There was, evidence on top of evidence that there was just hundreds of millions of dollars of cocaine coming into the United States. So if drugs are your key problem with Maduro, how do you jive that with the pardon of somebody like the ex-Honduras president, who by all accounts was a bad actor? The other thing I'll say is that that's underneath the surface is that they just discovered relatively recently the largest oil reserves in the world. Guess where? Venezuela. So, a lot of press reports are saying that there's a lot of scrambling to see if China is going to get this money or be able to use this oil, or it's going to go out to traditional allies. And then you have the issue of the government nationalizing much of the oil industry. So that caused a lot of angst as well. So there's a lot of different issues, and it will be interesting to see how they're resolved.
What's fascinating, so we'll get statistic. Venezuela has 303 billion barrels of oil reserve. Contrast that to Saudi Arabia is a distant second at 267 billion. Now, where's the United States? 55 billion. So we have like 1/6, and our country population is what, 5 times Venezuela. So, it's almost appears that this made secondary look like just a money grab, because ultimately, who's going to benefit? Well, billionaire oil companies in the United States will benefit by having access to this particular oil reserve. I see that we're out there intercepting tankers and things like that, and it's going to be interesting to see what occurs. I wouldn't be surprised, Counselor, if we see major contracts between highly paying donors getting major contracts with this Venezuelan country, if the deal's not already been met.
I agree, and the administration has stated just that they're interested in those oil reserves in Venezuela. They've made no secret about that.
Hey, what's troubled me, though, is that when I woke up last night and I watched this country being bombed, it went back to the fact that as of the other day, last look, there was 110 folks from that country that's been killed by America's armed forces, right? And I was concerned about that because the one institutional things that we have in America is a concept of due process of law. One of the outstanding things that make America exceptional is due process of law. The Seventh Amendment, right to jury trial, the right of a person who's accused of a crime to have their day in court. And randomly, we start killing people at sea who we've not seen any evidence that they've even committed a crime. But more disturbance, assuming that they had committed a crime, that they are doing exactly what they're saying, they wouldn't get the death penalty. So we're single-handedly giving folks the death penalty without due process of law. And that troubles me as an American citizen because that's sacred in our country, that this is what democracy is all about. Due process of law is paramount to having a democracy. But we got a lot of callers, so let's go to Pierre on the line. Go ahead, Pierre. You have a question coming for us.
Oh, good afternoon, Attorney Lee, Attorney Primes, and Attorney Banks. I just wanted to talk about, the affordability of people. And I'm going to tie this to a case that I had. And with respect to the Maduro thing, like Attorney Prime said, they just quitted, or they just pardoned one guy that was moving major amounts of drugs into the United States. I don't think a case against Maduro is ironclad, but he said the government has enormous resources. They do, and they can make stuff up too. So, but I don't think a conviction of Maduro is assured. But what I wanted to talk about real quickly in my situation is affordability. And as you know, Nate, a lot of times I have to represent myself in court because most people, I'd say most people listening to this news program cannot afford attorneys. And that's a problem, especially when it comes to workplace discrimination. And if you can't afford an attorney, you simply don't have any rights because you can't enforce them. And the EEOC is not going to enforce them. Real quickly, I just wanted to let you three attorneys know, and you especially, Nate, because I talked to you about that one court case that I had at the Black Expo this past summer. I've been put in a position where I've had to send a complaint to the Seventh Circuit. Now, when you do that, the Seventh Circuit, they just sanction you. They don't care what happens. You file a complaint against a judge, you're going to get sanctioned 90% of the time. Like I said, I ran into a situation where I felt like the magistrate and the attorneys were working together. Nate, and I'll get off of the phone, I just got an answer to my complaint a week ago. That complaint has been in court for a year and a half, and discovery closed this past summer, and I'm just now getting an answer to my complaint. I can't even conduct discovery. I couldn't even do discovery without an answer to my complaint. So how does that happen? Well, it happens when you're a pro se litigant and the other sides are working together. So I just want you guys to keep an eye on me, and I'll let you know how this turns out. But this affordability question for people and representation is horrible. You can't. I don't know too many people that have $25,000 laying around to enforce their rights. And if you guys have any opinions on affordability for pro se litigants or whatever, I'd like to hear them, because that's another thing that we have a problem with in this country, in this city, and especially in this country. Judge Posner, retired federal judge, said Seventh Circuit treats pro se litigants like trash. That's what he said. And he was a federal judge there for 30 some odd years. So I just wanted to put that out there, Nate, and give that to you and just let you know what happened and where I'm at, and just you guys just keep an eye out for me, because these people ain't nice.
I understand. Okay, thank you. So what Pierre is talking about, affordability, so we'll understand, it's a widespread economic problem where the cost of essential goods and services like housing, food, childcare, and healthcare rises much faster than wages. And the net result is that it makes it difficult for families, even the middle class, to cover the basic needs and build financial stability. So it became a big election issue because of the fact that we saw wages going up under the Biden administration, and we saw unprecedented jobs hiring and things like that. But at the same time, post pandemic, we had to deal with inflation because during the pandemic, because of the serious medical crisis, we had people that were staying at home to save their lives. And so the net result, to refresh everybody's recollection, in our state, you stayed at home, you got what, $975 a week in unemployment benefits for a whole year. And this, of course, fueled inflation because people had lots of money and they spent it. And the net result is, and that's how we got to this situation in part. Then, when people had money, they were able to buy things like cars, TVs, and all sorts of entertainment type things. And so, but it was necessary to save lives during the pandemic. So that's in a nutshell. Now, next call, you have a question or comment for us. Go ahead. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, caller. What's your question?
This is Guy calling. First, 2026 greetings to Banks, Grimes, and Lee. That's a good sounding firm name. But anyway, I wanted to point out that this year being such a historic year from 1776, I think that we need to be laser focused on the checks and balances provided in the U.S. Constitution. And I think that what we have essentially in the world in terms of government, you know, when we were all in school, we studied things like the monarchies, the socialism, communism, etc., the types of government. And it seems like a democracy was probably the closest to having a monarchy, which if you had a good king, you had the best of all worlds, so to speak. But getting a good king is a problem. I think that, as I say, the checks and balances are so very important in our governmental situation. We need to focus on that almost exclusively this year and make sure that we elect Congress that is responsive to the people. You know, this is probably one of our best hopes to try to slow down this gang in the White House. What happened this morning is a good example. And a lot of times the average person doesn't know what's going on, but those people in charge are laser focused on what they want to do. And it's usually about making money. And they seem to be having quite success at this point. So just wanted to point that out. Also, the inauguration of Donald Trump, you may remember, he was surrounded by a group of billionaires and trillionaires at his inauguration. And I'd like to point out that Warren Buffett, who obviously is a billionaire, has just retired at the age of 90 plus years. And I think he would be a good example of a person that is wealthy, a billionaire or a trillionaire, and his work in the world. So again, we're kind of like little David facing Goliath, but as what happened then, it can happen again.
Thank you very much. Okay, a couple of things. Attorney Banks, she gave us an update. What's going on with the president and the Venezuelan leader?
The president is on now, and I just heard a snippet that of him announcing that the United States will run Venezuela until a peaceful transition can occur. I have not heard what the specific plan is. I put my television back on mute to be attentive to our call, but I'm reading that Maduro and wife will face the full might of American justice. It's also my understanding that this strike occurs simultaneously 37 years ago with the capture of Manuel Noriega. So the timing is intentional.
I think your listeners should well know that if you remember General Colin Powell said, if you break a country, you're essentially responsible. So, the question presented, will it involve troops on the ground? And, will, citizens of Venezuela view us as liberators or colonialists? And if we're viewed as colonialists, it could be a danger for soldiers through no fault of their own that are stationed there. So that's going to be one concern. And running a whole country, the question is going to be presented, what's going to happen to the oil revenue? Is it going to be fairly divided? There's going to be a lot of different issues. And if you remember, during the time that Noriega was extradited and prosecuted, there was a lot of bad publicity for the United States in Central and Latin America, just decrying the former days of direct U.S. intervention in a lot of countries. So I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of those similar sentiments, and a lot of those abuses were, came to light during the Church Commission reports in the early 1970s, and that led to a lot of reforms of the Central Intelligence Agency, and also led to the passage of the War Powers Act, which limited the powers of the president to initiate hostile actions against a foreign country. So it will be interesting to see how things proceed.
Again, this is a dangerous precedent as well, that says if you don't like a leader, you can capture them, right? You can remove them from power. My understanding is that Russia has rebuked this strike and other countries as well. And the administration also expressly stated that we would not be starting wars or intervening in wars, and that our focus would be on domestic peace and tranquility. And so, again, the American people don't know what the objective is. We don't have any idea of what the goal will be. And chaos is likely to be the immediate result. The country is likely to be even further destabilized, and we'll see what happens.
The problem that we're dealing with is that when we look at the federal deficit, our military budget is rapidly approaching $1 trillion a year. In 2024, for example, the military budget was $824.3 billion. That was a almost $27 billion increase from 2023. So we're spending a significant amount of money on the military. And so when we start these wars, we're going to spend even more money on the military. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so if we spend more money on the military, that means there's less money for some of the essential things. Like, for example, health insurance premium for a lot of people who have the ACA coverage is going to have a substantial increase as of January 1st of this year. And so the point I'm making is that these are big financial decisions. And what are we going to do? We're going to take the Venezuelans' oil? I mean, what's the plan? And so I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned about the fact that we also put Americans at risk all over the globe. If these were truly hardcore drug dealers, I would think that one of the things we have to have fear about is retaliation. And so these are things I think that requires much more thought process and not just to gloss over. Because some of the political pundits says that some of this is a glorified distraction to prevent the Epstein controversy. Who knows? Now, the final issue, there's one other issue that you had brought out that the student loans issue is that I think that the administration did announce that they're going to start defaulting people on student loans. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, and it's really just tragic because, just briefly, my mother who passed away, she just basically said that in the 1950s and 40s, if you didn't have money, you couldn't go to college. So they created the student loan apparatus to give people an opportunity to do better, the second generation, the next generation. And so, I'm not saying that people shouldn't pay their loans, but there should be a pathway forward. For some reason, they had to leave school and these loans, accumulate. They weren't able to pay because of the expenses. There should be some pathway forward. The other problem that you're going to see a lot more loans going into default is that the administration limited many of the repayment programs that President Biden had initiated. So that's going to cause more people to go into default. So something that we really need to be concerned about, and more reason that we need to vote in 2026.
That's a big deal, counselor. Student
Yeah.
loans, when we hire lawyers, that's their big concerns. They have these massive student loans. And I was shocked at the amount of student loans because of the interest accumulation. And, I had one lawyer, his student loans over $400,000. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you ever get out of debt when you start off $400,000 in the hole, even if you make a good salary? Because if your interest is 10%, that's $40,000 a year tack on interest every year. If it doesn't amortize, if you pay it, so much a month, it goes down, but it's still going to be over $35,000 in interest. So you would never be able to pay this debt off your entire life. And so, I hope that there's a better resolution than defaulting the borrowers and then suing them and garnishing their wages, because that will set them back so badly until it'd be hard to recover. They won't be able to own a home and enjoy some of the benefits of their educational degree, in my
Right.
opinion.
Another thing, they're putting a limit on the amount of student loans that you could take out for graduate programs. They've indicated that $20,000 cap per year, 100,000 lifetime. A lot of these schools cost much more than that. Professional, they said it's $50,000 a year, $200,000 lifetime, and they eliminated nursing from the rankings of professional status. And a lot of these schools may cost more than that. So I get it. I know people are sensitive about going to debt, but I rather have, somebody with a college education and going to debt than somebody without it and they only have a high school diploma or worse. And it's good for our society. What really upset me, when President Biden had a lot of the loan forgiveness programs, you had a lot of Republicans railing against that. Didn't make any sense to me because your community is going to get better if you have more college graduates. You're going to be able to attract businesses. So it just was short-sighted in my view.
One final comment, Attorney Banks, before we close out.
All the more important that we ensure that we are registered to vote during this mid-year election, and that one of the ways you can also contribute and make sure that your voice is heard is to go to fivecalls.org, where you can address with Congress any issue that you have a concern about. At the top of the list today is the strike on Venezuela, as well as the demand to release the Epstein files now, and 32 other issues that you can address. Use 5calls.org to call your members of Congress as early and as often as you can.
Attorney Grimes, brother.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that it's so important that voting matters, elections matter. And then you had a number of people in our community saying it doesn't matter. This is proof positive that it does on so many different fronts.
Well, thank you, everyone. And please join us next Saturday as we deal with another legal issue today. Thank you so much. And God bless you all. Take care, everyone.